All right, there we
Hi,
go.
there we go.
Hey, third time's the charm.
Yeah, nice to finally get to meet you.
Absolutely. Nice to meet you too. I have never had that much trouble with Zoom before.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Well, I figured, there's probably a lot of heavy traffic going on, and bandwidth and all that stuff is can be kind of goofy sometimes. So, but
True, true.
but we're here, so that's the good thing.
Absolutely.
So what's new and exciting today? It's Friday.
It is. It's Friday. I got off work early. It's warm outside. It's
Yeah, it's gonna be like 60
beautiful.
degrees tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I have no complaints.
yeah. Where do you live?
Good day. I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
nice. I always thought Virginia was such a pretty state.
it
I had
is.
friends who lived there near Roanoke, and just the rolling, the hills and just the mountains are just so it's just so pretty.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Blue Ridge Mountains are, yeah, they're their own thing. Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, good. So, what are your exciting plans for the weekend?
I have a friend's birthday tonight. So probably gonna do something fun for that. And then tomorrow and Sunday, no idea, probably some writing, probably some video games.
Nice.
So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome.
take
Hey, it's
advantage
good.
of it.
If you can have a free weekend, take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Well, do you have any questions for me, or would you like to go ahead and get started? We can get this thing going.
I'm kind of new at this, so I'm just gonna go with whatever
Excellent.
whatever you see. You're the professional
Yeah.
here, so let me know where
well,
we're going.
we'll take that with a grain of salt. On Instagram, um, I've met so many interesting writers in all different genres, and I just wanted to get to know them. And I thought, well, I've been doing podcasts for a couple of years. Let's just do another one. Why not? And
Why
just
not? Just
yeah, sure, I can do three. And that's how this started. I just wanted to talk with writers, get to know them, and kind of give them a platform to showcase themselves. And I just like that. I think there's no competition. There's enough room on the top of the hill for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, that's great. Yeah, help everybody out, and then you get
Yeah,
to just meet some cool people and
that's
maybe
exact.
find new good authors that you enjoy.
Yeah, right, exactly. A worst case scenario, we have we have fun for 90 minutes, and that's a good too. That's nothing wrong with
That's
that. Yeah,
it.
so
Absolutely.
good. Okay, well, I'll just go ahead and begin. I'll do my intro and we'll get right into it.
Good.
Hey, this is Mark Justice. Welcome back to Between the Lines. Today we have fantasy writer Sena Andeo. Sena, welcome to Between the Lines.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Very excited
My
to be
Oh, good. My pleasure. This is going to be
here.
great. I was looking through your book a little bit, and I want to looking forward to kind of hearing all about you as a writer and about your writing process and all those kinds of things, um, and just other aspects. And going through some of your Instagram posts, I'm like, oh, okay, you do cosplay. This is awesome. So I want to talk about these things. Yeah. So let's just kind of go back to like childhood a little bit. Who were some of your favorite writers growing up, and maybe some of your favorite books?
I was a huge fan of Brian Jakes with the Redwall series.
Okay.
I read probably all his books multiple times. Tamora Pierce is another big one, big influence of mine. Neil Shusterman, something.
Hmm.
I really enjoy his work as well. So those are probably some of the biggest ones. I grew up reading Tolkien as well. So just a lot of fantasy, a lot of kind of like almost some dark ideas, kind of stuff like that. Um,
I think it's kind of prerequisite for every fantasy writer to read Tolkien at some time, right?
oh, it's required. Yeah, it's in the contract.
Yeah, excellent. Um, so what was it about the fantasy genre that drew you in, that attracts you still?
So I think that kind of started with like Star Wars even, which Lucas kind of says it's a space fantasy. It's not really science fiction. So just the idea of world building, creating creatures and just like cultures. So I started doing like my own almost encyclopedias of different animals and planets and stuff like that. And then it kind of evolved from there into something real. So that's
Yeah,
kind of where it started.
that's awesome. Are you also into Star Trek, or is that more straightforward to science fiction for you?
It's a little too science fictiony for me.
Okay,
My parents enjoy it. I've had family that enjoy it, but it was
sure.
never really my scene.
Yeah, it makes sense. Most people tend to fall in one camp or the other, you
Yeah,
know. And Star Wars, it's more the high fantasy, you know, if
true.
we're going to put it like in role-playing games terms, that's the Dungeons and Dragons, whereas like other kinds of science fiction is more like the Warhammer, you know, gritty, you know, like the Star Trek
Yeah.
tends to be a little more like that. So no, that's interesting. Well, you're all, you know, you're into cosplay, like I had mentioned. So has that inspired your writing, or is it a product of, or were you doing cosplay way before you considered wanting to be a writer?
The cosplay has kind of been more recently. I just kind of had pieces of some costumes that I put together, and I was like, "Wow, this is really fun!" And people like they know who the character is. So I just actually bought a like super blonde wig so I can use some like Daenerys or Ciri from The Witcher. So kind of trying to open it up a little bit.
Hmm.
Enjoy actually like making it myself instead of buying pieces. I feel like it adds so much more value to it when you're so involved in the process.
Sure. Yeah, it's easy to buy a costume, but to invest that much time into making one, sure, that shows a level of passion and commitment, you know, to that. Oh, that's good. Do you go to like conventions and things like that in cosplay, or do you go like fantasy conventions, anime conventions, anything like that, where or do you belong to a cosplay group?
Believe it or not, I have never been to a con.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I am totally surprised. Yeah.
No, I actually am not. I know GalaxyCon is coming to Richmond soon, so I've been thinking about wearing my Korra cosplay there. But I was also been looking at getting booths at cons for writing, but it's kind of expensive right now. I guess because there were none last year, so now they're trying to make up for prices. So
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Everything's gone up.
yeah, that's on hold for now.
Yeah, of course. So what is fantasy, or was it Galaxy Con? I've never heard of that one.
So it's something that was used to be pretty small. I think it's starting to get a little bit bigger now. It's
Mhm.
not like I mean, it's not anywhere near like San Diego or New York or anything.
Okay.
Like
Is it
Richmond's
a
a pretty small town, but
is it a regional convention, or is it something like Wizard World but comes
um,
to
I
Richmond?
think it's regional. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's like a Richmond.
Yeah. Those are sometimes really, really great. And when you go, because they can be small and there's an intimacy to those cons that you don't get at Wizard World. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, Wizard World, you get all the big stars, which is really kind of cool. I mean, you get to meet them and you spend your 10 seconds with them. Um, but at the small cons, that's when you get to have a chance to talk with the artists more, I think. There was one in Akron, Ohio. I'm from Ohio, so Akron had Akron Comic Con, and I met a couple comic book writers there, and they just would take all the time in the world to talk with you, um, which you wouldn't get that at a convention when there's 20,000 people, you know.
True.
And
Mhm.
so I'm really excited for you. I hope that you'll let me know if you go. I want to know how, you
Absolutely.
know, I want to see pictures. I want to know if you had a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be a lot of fun.
Oh, excellent. Good, good. Well, I guess we can get back into your writing. So, um, what first drew you to writing? Like, what, remember that spark that said, "Yeah, you know, I think I want to tell a story."
Well, so according to my mom, I started reading right before my third birthday. I don't know if that's true or not. That seems pretty young, but
Yeah, no, that's good.
she swears I read Green Eggs and Ham right before my third birthday. So
Nice.
it's always been kind of a spark. I wrote, I say that generously, my first book when I was probably about 4 or 5. Mostly stickers and little jumbled sentences. But I think a big part of it was that my mom did really encourage me to keep writing, keep practicing, even if it's little short stories, stuff like that. That really kind of gave me the motivation to keep at it, to think that it could be something that was good and that someone might want to read someday. So
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Do you still have that book?
I don't know. It's
Oh,
probably long
that
gone.
that would be so awesome to have that. Well, that's interesting that you say you could read by the time you were or 3 or so. as I was read to in the womb. I could read before I went to kindergarten, and remember, like, we were learning our ABCs, and I'm looking around like, do these kids not know how to read? Am I the only one? But that really kind of sets you up for life in a way. That
Mhm.
love for reading, the passion for reading, that was like the best thing you could give me in the world was a book, and just having them, there was a comfort into and the excitement of getting a new book. Like, we're going to go off in this exciting mystery or something, I completely immerse myself,
Mhm.
in these books. So that's fantastic. Kudos to your mom for encouraging you.
Yeah, yeah, that was
Yeah.
definitely a big part of it. Yeah.
Is she still a big fan and an encourager of your work?
She is. She definitely is. She and my dad, they do a lot of like beta reading for me, stuff like that. So yeah, they've been a big encouragement for me growing up. She even as like a little kid, she would take me to like Richmond Writer Group, stuff like that, vocabulary bees. So like very much like, hey, all you have to do is take advantage of this and you can do whatever you want with it. So I think that was really cool. I didn't appreciate, when you're like 12 and you're hanging out with a bunch of adults who are like writing. I didn't really appreciate it at the time. I was like, wow,
Sure.
this is really boring. But I think that it did kind of set me up to kind of see it, in a more serious light down the road. So
Yeah. But you can appreciate it now and look in the lenses. That's good though. That's awesome.
absolutely.
That's awesome. So this is why I like doing this show. I mean, learning these things, that's just so thrilling. That's exciting. Well, what made you want to write fantasy in that particular genre as opposed to any other genre?
Well, part of it was like I said, like, making creatures and worlds, and I was like, I kind of want to build stories with these things. It was also there was a lot of inspiration from like books like Lord of the Rings or even like Aragon, the Christopher Paolini books. A lot of influence from that, and then of course like Redwall, just like kind of the medieval like fighting and stuff like that, and that's kind of where it stemmed from, and then I just kind of took it from there and created my own world pretty much.
Nice. Oh, do you do role-playing game as well, like Dungeons and Dragons or anything like that?
I've played Dungeons and Dragons once. I
Okay.
think the biggest thing I learned from it is how hard it is to get a group of people together to do it.
Yeah. Hmm.
But I did really enjoy it. I played a gnome bard,
Oh
and it
yeah.
was great. Yes, it was great.
I had a bard. I loved playing that bard. And my good friend who was also my DM, just I had to write my own songs. It was just, yeah, I'm the bard. I'm going to write songs. So I wrote songs about what happened on the adventure, and then
Absolutely.
yeah, of course, that's what you're going to do. You're going to tell tales. No, I love D&D and all those role-playing games. Those are just great fun because then it is that high fantasy, and so
Hmm.
much was borrowed from like Irish folk culture and Tolkien and these other things. That kind of an amalgam of all this like folklore and things that exist. But yeah, no, that's fantastic. So when you are thinking about fantasy and fantasy fiction, what is it that makes a good fantasy story to you?
I really enjoy like complex books. I really have enjoyed like, Song of Ice and Fire. Just like really showing that it's a whole world. It's not necessarily this one character or this one group. Like everything affects everything,
Hmm.
and I think that that's like so important. I enjoy like a story that has a lot of like meat to it, and the deeper the better. Like I want to learn about this like I would like almost like not really more fun than in a class, but like I
Sure.
want to have an understanding of it like that, when I
Right.
really get into a story.
Okay. Yeah, those are pretty complex. I thought, HBO did a nice job with the Game of Thrones series. But those are really deep and intense. And you said you're a Star Wars fan. I mean, there's a tons, several hundred books which expand the Star Wars universe. So lots of lore, lots of history in there. So, and I remember getting a copy of the Silmarillion. Tolkien. Do you have that? Have you read
I
that?
do, yes. I have
Okay,
that.
yeah. And I just started reading it. I'm like, and I was reading it at the wrong time. I mean, I was staggered at at the size of the work and the completeness of it. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know if I want to read, 600 pages of elf and dwarf history. I was like,
He gets
okay,
really into it, like
exactly. I know
genealogy and
exactly, and
yeah.
yeah, there's an enthusiasm which I so admire and appreciate. It just wasn't for me at the time. So like one of those books, like, yeah, maybe I'll get back into that, because it's been ages. I also found, do you read science fiction as well, or is it all fantasy?
Sometimes I just started reading. I trying to get into Dune. I
Yeah,
know, like it's already like I'm getting into it now that it's popular, but like I like kind of reading books sometimes when there is like almost those visuals, like
sure,
a series or a movie or
right,
something.
yeah,
So I'm working through that one. I've been getting sidetracked. I like to read a lot of nonfiction sometimes, so I like
okay,
to like stagger it
yeah,
between nonfiction. So I haven't finished it yet, but I'm working
okay.
on
That
it.
was funny you mentioned that because I was going to mention Dune as a abject lesson in world building, in
Mm,
history building, because the depth of Herbert's universe here is staggering, and it just kind of grows with every book. And I've been trying to read the fifth one now. I've started like 6 times, and I'm like halfway through. And every time I like get distracted, something happens, and I can't finish it. And then I get enough time goes by. I'm like, I gotta read it all over again. I'm like
yeah.
trying to remember like what's going on. But it is a feat. And Herbert, that series I think is my favorite series of all time because of just Herbert's writing style. As Stephen King would say, you never read Stephen King, and I noticed. And I, like you, I haven't read anything from his since Pet Cemetery. That was way back in the day, but I do like his nonfiction on writing and things like that because I taught English and as a writer, I think he's got enough to say about how to write that I can take something from. But he said there are basically two writers. There's Faulkner's and there's Hemingway's, and he's a Faulkner. I'm a Faulkner. I think Tolkien would be a Faulkner. But Herbert is a Hemingway in that not the simple sentence structure, but doesn't need to kind of be extra verbose about description,
Mm,
enough to kind of say, here's the scene, and just kind of leaves it at that. There is a deft, hands-off approach to just giving you enough to set the mise en scène, as the fancy word would be, but then leaves the rest to your imagination. And that I find beautiful. It must have taken a long time for him to kind of learn that kind of delicate approach to giving enough, but not too much, you know?
yeah, it's definitely a balance, and it's
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah, it's definitely difficult.
And that's not my natural inclination as a writer. I mean, I like H.P. Lovecraft, and I used to write poetry. My undergraduate degrees in poetry, and so I'm all about the condensed language, but I like the vivid imagery, and I like those kinds of things that carries over to my fiction. But I'm a visual writer, and so I just tend to see a movie in my head, and I'm trying to convey it. And I like the language. I like vivid and all kinds of descriptions. So uh, but I want to work towards something one day where I can say, okay, I'm a hands off enough. I'm not sure if I'll ever get there, but yeah,
Lots of writing exercises.
I guess so. Right. Okay, Mark, take what you've normally done and cut it in half. Like, no,
No,
yeah,
I don't want
I
to.
can't. How can I do it? Yeah, right. And if with Herbert, it's just so effortless. And his other fiction is the same way. It's just his style, and I like that about him. Okay. How do you know when you've written something fantastic? Like from your perspective, your view of looking at fantasy, because we're going to talk about world building and those kinds of things specifically in here a little bit. But when do you know, like, yeah, this is the kind of fantasy that hits me in all the right places?
As far as like writing or like
Yeah,
reading?
no, when you're
Oh,
writing.
writing.
Yeah, how do you know when you've written something that's fantastic, like in the fantastic for you, like when you're writing? Because sometimes, we get that immediate gratification, like, yeah, I think I know what I'm doing here. And sometimes we feel nothing. Um, like, I don't know if I'm doing anything well or not. So when you're writing and you're trying to write a fantasy sequence or you're creating something that's fantastic, how do you know that you've succeeded?
I do like sometimes if I'm writing like a really intense scene or kind of wrapping things up, almost get this like buzzing feeling in my head. It's just like this like almost like elation, I suppose. Like, oh, like this is it. Like you could kind of feel it, you know? Or as far as like finishing a book, polishing it, editing it, if I feel like I've connected all the dots that I wanted to connect, in whatever fashion they connect, then I definitely feel like that satisfaction, like, yes, this is it. This is what I was trying to put onto paper. Like this is, and sometimes I feel like as a writer, it's like, if you're a painter or an artist or something, you can like step back and see the whole picture. And that it's like, you can see that this is like what I wanted it to be. But as a writer, like you almost have to take it in small pieces and then, be consistent enough to put it all together, and then know that it's done. But it's a lot harder because you're still gotta like look at all the tiny little pieces and you can't look at them all at once, you know.
Right. That's true. Yeah, you have to trust that everything that you have built one piece at a time, like you've assembled all the right puzzle pieces in the right order, and you have all of them. You're not missing puzzle pieces, and that's the thing you can't tell when you're working on a piece at a time, putting them together. It's only when you step back and kind of get that larger gestalt.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and even then, I think, particularly with fantasy tends to lend itself to series fairly easily, more so than I think other genres. You don't really see that like in the horror genre unless you're doing movies like sequels and stuff, because it's cheap to make, and they make money. And but with fantasy, these stories tend to be so grandiose. I think that's why they take just too long to tell a story. Do you find that when you were writing, did you begin with the idea of wanting to write a series, or did you want to like do like several just kind of standalone books?
I knew like all of my fantasy books would be in the same world, so they'd be all kind of connected anyway. With Tides of Ghaffora, which is the book that just recently came out, I was writing the backstory of one of the characters, trying to just get a good sense of like where she's coming from, like the way she think about things and react to things. And it turned into a prequel. So that's what I'm editing now. So yeah, sometimes it just kind of happens. But I mean, if there's a story to be told, then I'm just gonna write it down. So I have at least three more books planned in this series that have kind of just happened. Where
Nice.
I had the concept and I was like, oh, well, this connects to this. So all right, I guess we're just gonna roll with this. Like just keep
Right.
going.
Yeah, because it would be a shame to do all that work in world development and just to have one story, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's something I want to talk about, and just actually in two questions, because it's a serious amount of work to do it well and to do it right. So, are there other genres that you would like to write in, or do you want to stay with like the fantasy?
So I am writing kind of a little side project, which is kind of it's I guess you could call it superhero, but I don't like to call it superhero because it's
Okay.
not a superhero book.
Okay.
But it is a little bit more like set in our world. It's kind of like people who have like I call them unpowers or ungifts. So the opposite of superpowers.
Nice.
So I'm really excited about the concept.
That's
I
how I
think
feel pretty much every day. I think I'm one of those ungift people. So that's good. I'll be sure to read that one.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Mark
But
slumped back in his chair. Oh.
so I write a little bit of that. I've tried a little bit of like romance, but it still ended up being fantasy. Um,
Mhm.
and then I also just finished a anthology submission, which is fantasy horror,
Oh,
um,
nice.
which isn't set in the world that it usually is. It's kind of a standalone thing.
Okay.
Um, so a little bit here and there, but mostly, I think anything I would write would have definitely elements of supernatural or
Hmm.
fantasy, magic, stuff like that.
Right. It's just kind of where you like to write.
Exactly.
Yeah. The dabblings into these other genres, particularly, I mean, when you did the romance, you said you had to make it like a fantasy or supernatural. Um, I find those can be really interesting exercises from a writer standpoint, something that you normally wouldn't write, but or read.
Hmm.
Is that how you began approaching these different genres, or were there stories like did the story pop up and say, here's this like unpowered story, I think I want to tell that, or I have an idea for a romance but I don't want it to be straight romance? I mean, how did these other stories kind of evolve in your head?
So for the like the unpowers, the ungifted one, that was something I've had for a long time. I was just thinking like, oh, there's these people who can read minds. Well, what if there was someone who everyone could read their mind? So it just kind of started from that perspective, and just that's been something that I've been working on for a long time. I think I've rewritten that story more than any other. Um, so that one was just kind of its own thing, and then the romance one, that was kind of just more for fun. I don't usually like read romance,
Mhm.
so I'm very unfamiliar with it. So it was very much kind of more of an exercise for myself, just to kind of think outside of the box that I usually,
Sure.
run
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah. And as a writer, sometimes those exercises turn out to be quite quite pleasant and quite rewarding in a way that you don't expect,
Hmm.
you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I typically had written science fiction and horror most, and then comedy. I wrote a couple movies. You could see the posters behind my head. A couple of my movies. So these are comedies with their horror and science fiction themes. And then my first novel, though, was a cozy mystery, but there's no murder. But it was going to be a movie idea, and it turned into a novel. And I'd never even read a cozy, so I had no idea what the genre was like. I had to do my research, and then realize what the parameters were, and like, and then started doing my world building and developed a story around and created this this world, based a lot of my memories of growing up in the town that I grew up. I thought, might as well, if I'm going to write about hometown, I might as well write about my own. um
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, but I found it, even though it was very kind of sweet to my taste, and sometimes it was honest in a way, because the character, I try to ground it in something that was less saccharine. So the character is depressed because she just lost her job and she's coming home to try to regroup, and then finds herself involved in this mystery that kind of changes the lives of the people it touches. And I thought, okay, so she got this kind of multiple things going on. And but that evolved. I'm writing the sequel to that now, but I've written 4 books, and that one is actually the most popular, which is funny,
nice.
like sales wise. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow. And it was like, I know it's a popular genre, but a lot of people write in genres that they, there's no sales like my other ones. Like there's a splatter western and a pulp horror, action horror, and those are more inclined to my taste as a reader and as a writer. I just find it surprising, but the exercise in that cozy, but I'm doing things as a writer that I would never want to read. And if that makes any sense, like you said, you had never really read romance books. You're really quite familiar with it, but you found yourself writing one. Did you have those same kind of, there's a disconnect between a consumer and a producer. Like there was pleasure
Mhm.
in creating this cozy mystery that the consumer part of me would probably never have picked up my book and read it. Like, why am I going to read this? But as a writer, it was very satisfying to write that. And I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
No, absolutely. I think that one of the biggest things as a writer is you have to keep your mind open, because you just never know like what's going to inspire you, what's going to do well sales wise, what you're going to end up enjoying. I think it's so important to just kind of keep that open mind, to just surprise yourself before anyone, because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's for yourself, and
Okay.
you want people to enjoy it, but it's for you and what you get out of it. So I think
Yeah.
that's very important. Yes,
I think we're
great.
cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways. Yes, you write for yourself. Ultimately, you
Hmm.
have to be happy with what
Absolutely.
you've done. I know writers who write to audience, and they do it because this is what they want this to be their job. But I've never heard any of them talk about being happy with what they've written. I mean, they might, but they talk about the job and putting in
Yeah.
the 8 hours a day and so many novels a year because they need to keep this going. And to me, does it feels soulless in a way, you
That's too
know?
much like work. No, no, no. It's not.
Yes, yeah, exactly, you know?
I don't want it to
Right,
be work.
right. This is supposed to be some kind of, because writing is hard. I mean, I don't think people understand who've ever written a novel, how much work it takes to write a book. It's really a lot of work,
It really is. Yeah,
you know?
definitely.
And it's not all thrilling and exciting. There are times where it can be, but there are times where it's just tedious and boring. And it's like, you know, you just got to like churn it out. Like you're like laying a big giant brick wall and you got to put down one brick at a time. You know, you got to lay down the bricks.
Hmm.
Yeah. And you're like really happy when it's done in a way, like, okay.
Relief. It is like it's
Right.
it's very much a
Yeah.
relief.
Yeah. And usually about 3/4 of the way through a draft, I'm done with it. Like
Hmm.
emotionally, like metaphysically, like I know the end. I've rehearsed it in my head so many times. It's almost like I've already said it, told it, you know, and I just have to tell my fingers, you just got to make the words, you know, because the next book's already starting to talk to me like, hey, we're next, you know.
And it starts to sound really enticing. It's like new ideas. Like I don't
Right.
have to edit
Yes.
anything.
Yes. Because the fun's always, or the beginning is always fun. You know, the
Yeah.
first couple
Yes.
hours of a road trip is great, but by hour 14, it's like, oh, you know, or day 3, it's like, okay, you
Yeah. All
know.
right. I'm over it. I'm over it.
Yes. But I like what you said about editing, because that was something else I saw. I laughed at one of your videos about editing and how you feel about editing. Like you were thinking you're gonna make small changes, then you have to like wipe out a whole chapter or more. So is that something that you, a part of the writing process, is that a part of the writing process that you like the least, or is it just, you know, tell me about this. How did that video came about, I guess?
So I'm very much I don't really go into a book with like a big plot. Like I'll have a lot of ideas, concepts, I'll know where I want it to end up, themes that I want to be in it. But a lot of times I'll just be like, okay, I need something exciting to happen, and you'll just kind of go through it and then it'll kind of make sense. But then once I'm going back, I'm like, it's not smooth enough. Like it's not, it doesn't make the impact I wanted it to do. Like I'm getting the wrong feelings from it. So it's
Okay.
just
Hmm.
gotta delete it.
Yeah,
It is what it
sometimes
is.
deleting is easier than rewriting, or you know, depends on how much damage is done, I guess. In that,
Absolutely. It's
yeah,
like, is it
mhm.
worth it to like salvage it, or do I need to like start with some fresh inspiration, I suppose.
Yeah, because if you're going to be rewriting it anyway, sometimes writing from brand new page is better than trying to restructure. You know, if you've got
Yes.
garbage laying around, it's sometimes better to sweep the garbage away and start with a clean floor. You know.
Clean, yeah, clean floor, clean slate. Yeah, I'm a big believer in getting rid of the clutter.
Hmm. So from what I'm hearing, then is you're a pantser versus a plotter, and it comes to terms of organization.
I would say yes, in general. There are probably some stories that I'm a little more a plotter. Especially like I started Tides of Gafora as a pantser 100%. And about 2.5 years into it, I was like, wow, I really should have like plotted this out more. There was a lot of regret there. I learned a lot. But so I think I would consider like I try to plot a little bit more now, but I mean at the end of the day, said I'm writing for me, and if I'm
Mhm.
enjoying where it's going, I'm just gonna go with it and just whatever plot I've written out. All right, we're gonna write it
It
down.
just kind of evolves as you write. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
okay. Well, what kind of organization do you have? How much of an, like, do you have like an outline for what, whenever you do decide to organize, what does that look like to you, your organization?
Organization is a very loose term. So a lot of times when I get to a spot where I'm kind of stuck, what I'll do is I'll take like whatever papers I hand and I'll start writing a conversation with myself. And it's a very specific method. I know it doesn't sound like it, but I have to handwrite it so I can keep my head focused. And I'll basically just like ask myself questions. What is this person doing? But wait, don't they not like this? And I'll just like write pretty much a conversation with myself. And 9 times out of 10, it works. So that's my organization pretty
Oh,
much.
that's interesting. I've never heard that process before. I've seen complete pantsers. One writer, I think her interview is coming out, I think maybe next week or two.
Mhm.
She said when she talks about like, okay, chapter 4, I need something, and then she'll write like fight. That's like the only thing that
Mm.
she has for this show. Like, I know there's gonna be a fight, and that's it,
Yeah, yeah, that's
And I'm
it. That's
yeah,
it.
and I'm continually amazed at you pantsers, and I say you because now I'm designating myself as a plotter, and because I can't imagine going into a novel without knowing where I'm going to go, how I'm going to get there. It's like jumping in a car saying, well, I'm going to drive west and hope to get to California one day.
Yeah.
I want my GPS, I want my roadmap, I want to know what stops I'm making. And I think for me, that type of organization, because I'm a lister, I brainstorm with a list. I just start writing things down. I take the ideas that I like and I develop them, and then I do an outline, and then I do my drafting and revision. And I think a lot of that came from just being an academics for so long. I was a student, and so with academic writing, you have to have this organized, cogent paragraphs and coherent papers. And then I taught English composition for a long time, and that's that's where the world I'd lived in, and I transferred that over into my writing. So I have a really detailed outline of of my of my depends on how long the book is. Like my pulps are short, so the outlines are like 6 to 8 pages. My current work, it's going to be 400 to 450.
Mm.
And so my outline's like 23, 26 pages, something like that, color coded.
Wow, that is detailed. Yeah.
But that includes some like parts of dialogue and things like that as well that I had written, as things came to me. Like I know that, oh, this is good dialogue. I'm not sure where it's going to be yet, but when I put it in there, I just put it all there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but it's still, even though it sounds like a lot, and when you have 450 pages to write, you still have a lot of bricks to lay down. You still have to get point A to B to C to D. Those are the sinew points. And so, but it still helps me because then I can begin thinking like I know where I'm going to go. So I can kind of drew the breadcrumbs. I can kind of hint at
yeah,
things, that themes and stuff that because I worked it all out ahead of time. My meta themes and things. So I try to be cognizant of that as I go. Um,
yeah, yeah. So you
but
have more of an idea of like it's like once you get the main thing kind of set, you have more like opportunity to be creative around it, like surrounding it. You can kind of build
yeah,
out instead of trying to build it as you're going.
right. And it helps me feel confident going into whatever it is that I'm writing because I write from beginning to end. I don't like write parts, pieces, and then Frankenstein it together. I, you know, even on days where you write something and when you're writing, it's not going to work. Like you just know. Um, I'll just go ahead and write it anyway. And I'll just say, well, I can always keep it for something else later. I'll cannibalize this, for something else. And it just, because I have the safety net, it's there.
Yeah, yeah,
And sometimes you still don't know how it's all going to end up because there's still that wonderful living thing about writing. Even though you have intention and invention, imagination meets inspiration and journey, discovery kind of all together. And so I might have my outline like a scene where the characters have dinner with one character's parents, and that's kind of essentially what I'll have. And that might end up being like a 15-page scene because it just the dinner, the conversation, the jokes, the things that happen, and I know I want it to be like a warm aspect to the book. So,
hmm
but those are the kinds of things those kind of happen as you write. Like, and when you experience, sometimes the characters take over and they just kind of, you're just recording what they say. Like they just begin to live a little bit on their own. And that's kind of a really wonderful place to be.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I think probably, as far as like a main, kind of like what you were saying, like that main line, that main idea. For me, I think the only main really line I have is like my character arc. So I know how I want my character to develop and where I want them to end up. And so I kind of like world build around that. But I think, that can be like the most important part of the story is like the development. Like how did
Yeah,
they descend into madness, or how did
sure.
they what is their villain origin story?
Yeah, that's
Stuff like
important.
that.
Yeah, because that villain is probably a hero in her own world, right. It's a matter of perspective. And I think
Absolutely.
it's important to know these things to a greater degree. And um, Yeah, I like that. You can take the time to do that. You want to know these characters and develop that. And that's what I want to talk to you a little bit right now is this concept of world building and how do you design your world? You got a fantasy world that your stories are taking place in. Can you talk about how that world began and how you continue to flesh it out? Um, all about that process because I'm really intrigued.
So my world is called Andriel. And it started, I think I was 12 when I wrote my first book that was kind of took place in there. And like I would just kind of I had it printed out and I would just like let my friends borrow it and they loved it. And I mean, I'm 12, they were about the same age. So,
Sure.
it wasn't impressive writing, but they loved the world, they loved the story, they loved the creatures and the characters and the
Yeah.
magic. And so I kind of took that concept and I like just kind of kept expanding on it. And most of the world, like the lands are based off of, loosely based off of real world culture or stuff like that. And then how they interact with magic is unique in every place. So it just kind of, and then I just started building this map and it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And until, I have it a big like drawing on my wall pretty much that I reference all the time. Make sure I
Nice.
have got everything where it's supposed to
Yeah.
be.
Do you plan on putting that map into your books at all so the reader has some context?
Yes. So Tides of Gafora has a map of the regional area.
Okay.
I guess I haven't done like a full map in the book
Hmm.
yet. But yeah, definitely plans to introduce that at some point because I know that could be helpful.
Yeah. Well, even the regional map I think has to be helpful both for the reader and for you, the writer, because if you're writing a series, you want to make sure that your context it's accurate and you also have continuity.
Yes.
You can't have a town by the seashore in one episode and oh, it's in the mountains in the next book. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found myself doing the same thing with my cozy because even though I know the town, I have to remember like street names that things were on and like where they are relative to one another. So I started like drawing this town out just for my own sake. Like I don't remember what street the library is on, and I'll look for my one book. I'm like I can't find it. Um, so I just have to draw this map, and then the last book I'll probably have the town because right now I'm still fleshing it out. So you
Hmm.
know, but no, I love that aspect. And it's so like D&D that you would develop this world, and that's why I hope you can find some people to play with, you know.
Yeah.
um, yeah, there's lots of online forums now for that too. You can
True,
play.
true, yeah.
Yeah. Excuse me. So what aspect about your world? I'm not just, oh, I was going to ask, 12 years old when you wrote your first book, do you have
Mhm.
that book? You still have it?
It's somewhere. Yes, I have been looking for it so hard because I've been actually rewriting it because it's part of my fantasy series, Blood of the Gods, but I don't know where it is.
Okay.
It's driving me nuts.
Yeah, because that
So
you'd
hopefully I'll
want to
find
type it up and have that, you want to have that around. Because I want to
it.
read it. I want to totally want to read that book.
Yeah.
It just fills me with so much joy to hear someone at 12 years old, you're writing a fantasy book that your friends are loving. I'm like, oh my God. Uh,
Yeah. It caught me off guard. I thought it was like I had a friend who like got in trouble in class because she was like reading it at school and she doesn't usually like fantasies. So it was pretty neat. Like that was definitely a confidence boost for me. I was like, oh,
oh
people
yeah.
actually enjoy this. Like it's
Yeah,
not just me.
that's amazing. Did you like write it on like note paper? Is that how you kind of passed it around, or did you transfer it into like a diary or a hardback book, or do you remember physically what it looks
Um
like?
So it was pretty much just like printer paper that my mom had like spiral bound again supporting me. And I like designed a little cover on like Microsoft Word. Like I had like little angles, like little jewels that I designed for it. So it was very rudimentary, but I mean I was pretty excited to just be able to hold it in my hands, to have something like
Yeah,
that.
that is just so awesome. That is so great. I love that story. Uh, I remember I tried writing my first book. I was about 16 or 17. It was going to be a sequel to Dawn of the Dead, the George Romero
Oh,
classic.
cool.
Yeah, I saw it at a midnight showing, the classic, the 1978 version with some friends, and I was so like mind blown. Like, oh my God, I'd never seen anything like that. I immediately started working on the novel, the sequel, Feast of the Dead, um, with all my friends in it. You know, it was so horrible. This combination of like zombie apocalypse and my love for Arthurian mythos. So, you know, all the characters are like running around in this, like wearing like, you know, combat fatigues and like wielding swords, you know.
Nice.
Yeah, it's horrible. And I realized like by about chapter 5, I'm like, oh my God, this is just shit. This is so horrible. And my mom was being supportive because she was typing it up because I didn't know how to type at the time. So
Hmm.
and you know, never having written something, when you first hold that first thing, like the fact that it was typed on paper, I thought, oh, I've done it. I've written a book. Oh, this is
I
how it
made
this
it.
now it's real. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. No, I quickly threw that away. It was just
Oh
garbage.
no.
You know, yeah, no, no, no. I no, that just serves that was just embarrassing, you know. No, I had tons of ideas. I think when I was in, you know, like high school, I really knew I wanted to be a writer. Um, but I let fear get in the way, like fear of not of failure, you know, of not carrying a story with dialogue, and but I just didn't give myself the confidence to try. You know, I think it's why I went to poetry, because you don't have to worry about dialogue, you know. But it wasn't really me. It didn't really sit 100%, you know. But kudos to you. I'm so impressed that you just had this freedom and support and confidence going forward to keep on writing. So I am just so impressed. This is awesome. Thank you for sharing all this with me. This is
Yeah.
very, very exciting to hear. So what aspect of your world do you like the most?
The most. I like. I guess like would be the. It's almost like a. I don't want to call them a race because they're not really human, but these kind of humanoid people. Call them vipers. So they're basically these like kind of gray looking people with like tiger striped eyes who have the ability to like steal the souls from people they kill.
Thanks.
Basically, like they get high off of it, like they get like this like euphoria, and it's just like a fun concept. I don't know.
No, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a fun
Yes,
concept to
it's just
me.
like so utterly free. You know, like how old were you when you made up these people, these humanoids? Was this like
um
a young creation, like when you were like 12, 13? Like, yeah, these people suck their souls from people. They're gonna get high off of it.
no, this was later. I was probably 19 or 20. Originally the concept I had was like that it was like more of a like apocalyptic thing, where like they would like in a futuristic Earth, they would like come out of the ground because they've been living underground for so long, and then like trying to integrate into society. But then I asked some advice, and it was like maybe they'd be fit better in my fantasy world, because I kind of put that to the side for a while, and then that kind of triggered my first book, which is Eulogy, Tale of Terial, and then from there I was like, I got this one published, and I think I just need to keep going with it because I enjoy the building of the worlds, I enjoy the creatures, and I felt like I just had so many more stories like brewing in this world, and I was like, I kind of just want to get it all out there.
Oh yeah. Um, there's that passion that comes along with that creative spark. There's a mania to it that's all kinds of delightful, you know.
Hmm.
It sounds like I could easily see these characters, this race, turning into the vampire or the myth of the vampiric in your world, because they are kind of essentially are that. You
Pretty
know,
much, yeah.
they it's like your version of the vampire. Unless you have vampires in your world already, you know. So
I don't know, but I
yeah,
mean, it's still a growing world. Who knows?
you're right, right, exactly. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Um, is there an aspect of your world that you like the least? Like, you know, I'm not crazy about this. I think I'm gonna have to redo this.
So I mean, at this point, like the stuff that's been written, I can't really like redo. I think I would do like more. I feel like one of my countries was almost too like typical fantasy,
Hmm.
like too fairy tale-ish, to
Hmm.
some extent. So just like encouraging myself to kind of expand a little bit more. The books I had before were pretty much all set in that one area. And I realized I was just missing out on a lot of like potential for, it's showing how the cultures interact with each other and having people think, if you're going to create this whole new world, why are you going to keep it something that's already been done before?
Yeah, it's hard to straddle this line of, if you're creating fantasy, there are so many tropes that have just become so commonplace and expected. Like all the Tolkien stuff. um, and then how do you create something wholesale and new? Because you had said you like to kind of base your civilizations on Earth-like civilizations,
Hmm.
which is what I did always when I was doing gaming. All my civilizations had an element of something that Earth-like, and it was probably a quick way for me to get my players to understand where they were from. So I had a civilization that was like ancient Rome, and one that was like Greece with twists on it. But it was just kind of you get a framework.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but to try to create entire civilizations and multiple cultures that exist in a fantasy, realm without borrowing from those tropes, that's monumental. It really is.
It's, just to some part, it's almost impossible. But I
Hmm.
think that, there's nothing wrong with like borrowing all kinds of stuff. It helps, I think it helps people to get kind of a real grip on what they're reading and give them their own visual, especially if you, like you said, you're kind of writing in that very open, leaving it to the imagination sort of way.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's a balance, and I think it's just important to, if you have a good idea, to just go with it because it's probably been done before, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you won't do it better.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And you got to make it your own. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. For my last iteration of role playing gaming, I was trying to create my own system, and it's just too much to do. It's just crazy. But I did create a world generator that introduced not only creating world and government and trade and all the aspects of a government, but also like a popular culture generator. My degree in popular culture, so it allows you to trace back your civilization and like all the things that were trending, or your heroes, your civil, your your formula, your myths, your trends, fads, all these kinds of things over thousands of years if you want. So you can really get in depth. So if that sounds anything that you might be interested in, we'll talk after the show.
Yeah,
Because
it
if
is pretty cool.
you
It's
could
a
just
cool
roll
concept.
with number, if you're stuck with something, I don't want to influence you at all. But I found that to be kind of interesting and helpful to generate a civilization within a few minutes, wholesale
Mm,
from cloth. It was workable. You could tweak it, but
yeah. Yeah, sounds like a great tool.
yeah, I'm still hoping to like turn it into something I can make money from. That sounds like a pretty good idea.
All right.
Yeah, why not? Um, let's talk about your characters. And because the world is great, you have this wonderful world system, but then you have to have characters that readers care about or get angry, they don't like, hate, and they're fun to create. So how do you go and develop and create your characters?
So I think that going back to the tropes and stuff, I try to avoid the typical tropes. My first book was definitely more, he wasn't the hero. He's like kind of the anti-hero, the antagonist. But you also kind of, I like to add the elements of like, oh, you kind of get where he's coming from, or with Tides of Ghaffora, the characters, it's like just an old lady who's like a seamstress. It's just like people who you wouldn't expect, and they're not necessarily heroes, or do heroic things. They kind of just get thrown into these conflicts or these worlds, and they just kind of handle it. I try to do it where they handle it as realistically as possible. I think that having characters that people can relate to, but also kind of admire, it's a balance, and it's probably one of the more important aspects of a really good story.
Yeah, that makes sense. It really does. Which of your characters would you most like to have a drink with?
That's a
Or
good
or
question.
dinner if you're not a drinker, then dinner, just a meet and talk, hang out.
I have to say, like, my favorite character that I've written is Wendwin from Tides of Gomorrah. And it's going to be her who gets the prequel too. It was her backstory that I was writing that I got really excited about, and then 120,000 words later, here we are.
Yeah, that's kind of awesome. Yeah, I remember hearing a story similar to that from Stephen King. It's like he saw something on the news about a police officer, and there was a shooting, and he thought he could write a story about that, maybe about 10, 12,000 words. And he said, yeah, 500 pages in, I realized I was writing a novel because, he just kept on going. And I guess if anyone can do it, he's certainly done it enough to where he knows his craft. But that, staggered my mind. Short stories, I'm good at. You get an idea, like, yeah, I'm going to write about a ventriloquist doll and he attacks his owner. Okay, cool. And then you just kind of go because you just, it's a short and sweet. But so every artist has different creative process, and you've talked quite a bit about yours. Is there anything more that you can add about your creative process, like when from beginning idea to finished product? It sounds like you get an idea, you kind of have a loose outline of what you want to happen, and then you kind of as a pantser, you just kind of write it and see if it kind of goes in that general direction. Is that fairly accurate?
So I'd say I don't like specific process wise, you don't really have a process for the story. I do have a process of how I write it, and I think that definitely is the story.
Okay.
Um, so all of my novels I start writing longhand in notebooks. So
Oh,
I will
okay.
completely write it longhand in notebook. It forces me to slow down and think about it.
Yeah.
That also kind of whether it like depending on the book, it depends like I may take all of it or I may decide to change it completely as I'm typing it up. So I guess that would almost be like my outline would be the handwritten one. I also enjoy just being able to like take it with me, stuff like that.
Hmm.
So once I have it all written down in the notebook, then I'll transfer it to the computer. There might be some things, and then just going through and reading it as I'm putting it in, I get an idea of like, I really don't like this, or I really like this. I want to do more with it.
Hmm.
And then I end up adding a lot of words because when I'm writing longhand, I'm kind of just getting the general idea. There may be some details I want to put in there that I know I want added. So I'll just kind of go from there. And then once it's on the computer, then it's editing and editing and editing.
Right. Right. And by editing, you mean addition, not just subtraction.
Absolutely. Yeah. I definitely
Yeah.
do a lot more addition than I do subtraction. I'll probably start with like 70 to 80,000 words and then add another 30 to 40,000 during
Okay.
the process.
Nice. So you write 70,000 words longhand by hand.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. So how many notebooks does that fill up for you?
Oh, I have dozens. And I keep them. A lot of them are very old. Some of them dating back as like 2000, 2002. So I
Oh,
keep all of them. And a
yes.
lot of them will just have pieces of stories in them once I never finished, but I always keep those. I even have pieces of loose notebook paper that I keep on my shelves too. Just like ideas or, outlines because I did try to do outlines for a while, and then I realized I am keeping none of this. So
Right, right. Yeah. It's not true to you in your creative process.
yeah, yeah, I
You
think
right.
it's a lot of trial and error, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people just assume you should just know the process you want. It's not. You have to kind of try a lot of different things and see what works best for
Yeah.
you.
Because as a writer, you always start, well, maybe you didn't because, well, maybe, no, I think we all do. Our early efforts are usually somewhat imitative of something we've read or, because we haven't found what they call your voice. It's one of the first things you're going to learn in a creative writing class is, write for yourself, number one, or sorry, write what you know, and then evolve into this thing called a voice, how you are going to say what you're going to say. And so we all start with that imitative voice. Um,
Mhm.
when when did that change happen for you? Like when did you start realizing, or maybe it was with your first book, um, when did you start knowing that you had a particular way of wanting to write, like your voice? When were you first cognizant of your own voice?
So I definitely my first like 10 books as a little kid were absolutely ripoffs. Like down to like the pictures and everything. I would just take kids' books that I liked and I would just rewrite them pretty much, like from memory, and draw pictures and stuff. And then I wrote one of my first like official novels, I guess, was pretty much just a ripoff of Maximum Ride from like James Patterson. Even my original like fantasy book was eerily similar to Lord of the Rings, and a little bit of Aragon and thrown in there. So I think that I realized it wasn't that like that book. The original writing was borrowed a lot of elements very generously, but in hearing feedback, I realized that people enjoyed that my books were very fast paced. They enjoyed that there were a lot of like twists and turns, and that there almost like wasn't a break. Like it was just constant things happening, which is kind of like
Mhm.
makes sense because that's kind of how my brain works. But it's just very consistent twists and turns. And I realized that that was something that they seemed to enjoy. And so I kind of took that basic concept and then I learned to kind of still, build more around it, slow it down a little bit, learn how much I wanted to describe versus how much I wanted to leave to the imagination. And it just kind of evolved from there. So I think getting feedback around, early teenage years is when I started to realize, okay, there is a voice in there. It's not just ripoffs of other authors.
Yeah, but you have to go through that process,
Yeah,
before you get
absolutely.
there. Right. And then I think once you start that journey and you start trusting that voice a little bit more, and and then you realize, okay, I have something to say in a way that I want to say it, and it's going to be okay. It doesn't, if it makes me happy, that's the litmus test. At the end of the day, are you on that page? I mean, it's not that you're not going to take inspiration from other sources or writers. I mean, or phrasings sometimes, but at the end of the day, is it you? I think that I think is an ultimate litmus test for any writer.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you say like, is it you on the page? Because that's something I learned, as I was gaining my voice, is that I put these like little pieces of myself in there and it just kind of
Hmm.
grounds it in truth and it makes it more believable and I think
Yeah.
more enjoyable as a reader because you can tell when like an author really, really puts like pieces of themselves on the pages.
Oh yeah. I think that's how we relate to the characters,
Mhm.
how we connect to what's going on, especially if you have any kind of internal monologue with the character or do any kind of discussion of the character's thoughts. Yeah, we have to put ourselves in there.
Yeah.
That's how we relate to what's going on, and because that's when writing becomes cathartic, I think, is if
Hmm.
we're dealing with a character who's complex and who's dealing with like real world emotions, real world problems, then it allows us to work on those in ourselves. The process, it's almost like self-therapy. you know
It is. It
yeah.
is. And I've never been a big diary writer, but it definitely helps to kind of put myself in those things and I can kind of work through it with the character or, maybe they react in a way that I wouldn't or, it's just
Hmm.
kind of leaves this very interesting kind of 3D aspect to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you put yourself out on the page, when it's you, that's a uniquely satisfying feeling that kind of begins to influence how you write going forward. Like once it happens, you start thinking, I don't want to not write this way. Like I can't afford to be fake. I'm like, now that I'm in touch with who I really am as a writer, I just want it to all be real, you know?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's that's I think it's how my own writing has changed in a way. Because like I said, I mentioned, I let fear of dialogue get in the way of writing long fiction. And it wasn't until I started writing movies about a decade ago that I realized I'm telling a whole story with nothing but dialogue. Like I guess I can tell a story and still be true to myself because they're comedies and that's my natural inclination is humor and like, oh, okay. Like, oh, I can totally do this. But I'm also developing characters and plot. And then that's what gave me the courage after writing through movies. I'm like, there's no reason why I shouldn't be writing long fiction. And that was such a different process than writing movies. I mean, not the act of it, because you start with the idea and develop it. The movies had less structure for me. They're more pantsing. I knew like scenes, like I knew the general story, and I kind of had like scenes that I wrote, and then I had to like look at the gaps. Like, okay, well, I need something that transitions between this scene and this scene. So what could I do there? Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
was it was it wasn't nearly as organized. It was more chaotic. But that was kind of part of the fun, or at least that
Yeah,
writing.
very
You
different
know,
from writing the books. Yeah, it's good to stretch both sides of your mind like that. Yeah.
yeah. For me, it was and I think maybe because the movies didn't seem as long. There's no exposition. It's just dialogue. So I don't have to worry about things making sense as a narrator. There's no prose. It's just words, dialogue. So there was less to worry about, I think, you know, in those. But
Yeah, a little bit more freedom. You're not overthinking it.
yeah, and that's what everyone will say. Yeah, Mark was not thinking too much when he wrote these
Oh,
movies.
yeah.
But that's kind of what makes them fun. There's like,
Mhm. Yeah.
look, if you can't tell from the title, Quest for Uranus, if that's going to be silly, like, come on. Yeah, of course, it's not meant to be taken seriously.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
do you do any kinds of research for your books?
So in the past I haven't. For Tides of Gafora, I had to do a lot of research for ships and naval stuff. I wasn't too familiar with it, but it's very much like a maritime story. So there was a lot of research just on like names for things, a little bit of lingo. I tried to keep my own kind of lingo in there too. So I did a lot of research on that, like different kinds of ships and boats and like the kinds of water and speeds and stuff like that. So I think I did more research on this one than I have done on any in the past.
Yeah, that I like the research aspect. And when you find those things and you could put them into your story seamlessly, I think that's when it kind of pays off in that way. It's like you don't want to sound like you're a history lesson or you're beating someone over the head. You're trying to teach them something, but you want to have a grounding of a reality enough to where things make sense and are reliable. Um, and those details are important,
Yeah,
little
yeah, they
details.
are. They are. Yeah, it was a good challenge for me because I usually do not like the research part of it. I'm more into the fantasy because I have a lot more freedom with it. But I feel like I learned a lot too. And that I think that, like you said, that it's cool. It's good to have that element in there to kind of ground it, kind of make it a little bit more believable. Um, if it is something that's fantastic.
Sure. Oh yeah, I totally agree. Do you have a favorite time of the day that you like to write?
Um, so the most writing I've gotten done, the most productive I've been is when I'm working a desk job.
Well,
So I'll be
yeah,
at work, and if I don't have anything to do, or even in high school and a little bit in college, I try not to do it as much. But if I'm in class and I happen to have a notebook, that's when it's pretty much when I'm just distracting myself from things. Because if I try to make time for myself at home to do it, I'll just always find something to do. I'm like, oh, well, I need to work out. Oh, I need to clean. Oh, I need to I'll
yeah.
be like scrubbing the floorboards before I sit down and write. So I'm
That's
always
good.
like, it's never comfortable enough for me to like sit down and
Yeah.
just floors.
Okay.
So if I'm in an area that's not home, that's when I'm most productive.
Interesting.
Usually
Because
during
you
like
are escaping from what you were doing away from home, but
ex-
home, you're nesting when you get home. Right.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I get it. I get it. Well, I can see that. Um, the interview that just came out, it comes out tomorrow, actually. No, wait, today's Saturday, right? Is today? No, tomorrow's
It's
Saturday.
Friday. Yes.
Today's Friday. The episode that comes out tomorrow is the writer John Leister. He writes detective fiction. Kind of like Mickey Explained, kind of fun, tongue-in-cheek stuff. And he
Yeah.
writes every day on his lunch break. Like you, he writes longhand in a notebook, and he
Hmm.
just spends that half an hour or an hour every day, just writes by hand and then transcribes it when he gets home. And he's only been writing a few years, but he's done like 65 books that way. And
Wow.
yeah,
That's
I
a lot of
know.
books.
Yeah, I mean they're smaller books, they're like pulp and smaller, but still, It's still staggering to
Yeah.
me, like, oh my God, but that's his process. And I was just fascinated by that. And like, I'm just imagining you at a desk, like nothing's going on. No one,
Hmm.
I don't have to do anything. It's like, I might as well, if I have something to do and fill the time, I might as well, you know?
Yeah. Even when I worked at restaurants, I would take little bar napkins and just write like little scenes, and then I just end up with like a pile of them at the end of the day that I'll take home. And I
Nice.
might not even do anything with it, but I'm still writing. I'm like, okay, I want a really dramatic scene, or I want,
Yeah.
something I want to put in a book. And then in class and stuff, it was great because they see you writing in a notebook and they think you're taking notes. They think you're paying attention. No one questions
So
it.
that's what my students were doing. Um,
Now you know.
now I know. Well, their grades showed it. So,
Right there, yeah.
no, that's good. No, no, that's great. I love that because I have a notebook I keep with me when I go out, or I was when I was in the creative phase. I would take it with me everywhere. I would go visit my parents. I'd bring it with me because I never knew when I was going to get an idea for something.
Yeah.
And so because otherwise I'll forget. And this is like, dialogue would come to me, like whole scenes. And I'm just
Mm,
writing down as fast as I can and hoping that I can read my own bad handwriting when I get it back home. Um, so no, I totally get that. I would take it to book shows when I would do shows because sometimes it's just slow and you may not get a customer for an hour. So what else are you gonna do? Just sit there and like, no, 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 I'm gonna be creative or use it
yeah.
productively. So I know I totally get it. I totally get it. Yeah, I that's where I came across doing the idea of doing a horror story set in my cozy mystery universe in that world. Same characters, gonna tell my 4 stories. Then I'm gonna do a horror story where I kill everybody. So you
Just for
know,
fun, right?
yeah. For as a
Why not?
writer, as an exercise, it'll be great fun. I've already written parts of the book at those shows.
Mm,
I know how a lot of the characters are gonna die. I wrote the end of the novel already, and it was like a gut punch. I felt it like, oh, and like, yeah, okay. It was that's when it moved me. I thought, okay, I hope the people who read this feel as moved as I do,
mm.
because
Yeah, yeah.
but we'll see. I guess we'll find out, in a couple of years. Well, I was going to ask like if you listen to music while writing, but it sounds like your other distractions are just being away from home. I mean, and like that's so you don't have a time set aside every day to write. It's just when the inspiration hits while you're doing something
Mm.
else.
So I did used to listen to a lot of music when I was writing, like as a teenager, and I actually would write the name of the song at the top of the page, so I kind of knew what sort of influence I was getting while I was writing it, or like I had this idea of like writing a book, but then it has like a soundtrack, you know?
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, sure.
yeah, or like associating them with certain songs. So I would
Hmm.
listen to that, but then I realized that it was a distraction. But I do feel like I get a lot more productive when I listen to like instrumental metal, stuff like
Nice.
that.
Okay.
I do enjoy metal. So I feel like I do have the potential to be productive with that, but there's always the risk that I never find quite the right song and I end up just like scrolling or
Yeah.
searching or like for a while.
Yeah. It's like
So
having
it's
a
it's
Netflix and spending 2 hours trying to find the right thing to watch.
yeah, it's a dangerous game, but sometimes it works out.
Yeah, that's cool. What kind of instrumental metal do you like?
I really enjoy Polyphia. I don't know if
Oh,
you've heard of them.
don't know them.
They're like I don't they consider themselves metal. They're not like heavy metal. They're more like I really enjoy progressive metal. Um,
Yes.
so I
Who's your
enjoy that
favorite who's your favorite progressive metal band? Prague.
between the buried and me.
Who was that?
Between the buried and me.
Oh, okay.
I really enjoy them. I enjoy Parkway Drive. I listen to a lot of August Burns Red.
Okay.
Um,
I know them. I've not listened to the other bands. Are you
yeah,
like into like
like
Dream Theater and Rush and those bands? Do you know those
I
bands?
like
Are they
some
too
Dream
old school?
Theater. No, I do listen to some Dream Theater. That's I think they will show up like on my playlist when I'm listening to other stuff like
Hmm.
while writing. So yeah, bands like that. Trying to think what else. I really enjoyed All Shall Perish before they broke up. Lamb of God.
Okay.
That's
Nice. All right. Good. You're the first person I think who's talked about metal as a soundtrack to writing.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. When I wrote my third book, it's just toxic. It was about my 40-year struggle with my coming away from fundamentalist Christianity and becoming an apostate. I wrote that book because a lot of it was a lot of anger. And so I listened to Slayer an awful lot when I wrote that book. But I have a playlist. I tend to, depending on what I'm writing, I like to listen to different things. So my cozies, there's a one of the characters has a radio station that plays a lot of 1930s music. So I have a lot of 1930s music. Lionel Hampton, who plays like vibraphone. I love vibraphone, and so I try to listen to that. It kind of gets me in that kind of a other timely kind of mood,
Mm, yeah.
because the character of the town itself is kind of anachronistic. There are elements like that are kind of stuck in time, which is almost a metaphor because the theme of the series is called seasons change, like 4 seasons, and an element of change is the theme in each book, being pushed out of our comfort zones and how change can be uncomfortable but ultimately can be positive.
Yeah.
And so there's these elements of the town that are kind of stuck, like in the 70s or 50s or 30s or whatever, but it's not like in a bad way. It's just kind of like this is how things are. So, but and then when I wrote my last book, which is the pulp action horror Death's Head, it takes place in Haiti, near Haiti, and in like the early 1930s. It's my homage to the Phantom. So I listened to a lot of voodoo music, voodoo drums and voodoo rituals, and which was really kind of awesome.
Yeah.
Listen to like 5 hours a day to these things. After a while, I started really digging it. Like, yeah, I totally love this stuff, but
Yeah.
it immersed me. It made me kind of feel something. So I get that. I totally get that. Um, but now you give me some bands I have to listen to, and I haven't listened to them. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might like heavy metal horror, my other podcast. You might enjoy that and listening to some of
Yeah.
these guys that we've interviewed. So I'll see if we can reach out to these bands and let you know if they come on.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Tell me, well, in a way, this is going to be kind of. I mean, you've already answered this question because most writers have never did what you did when you were at age 12 and you hand wrote a book and or typed up and passed around. But I was going to ask you, tell me how you felt seeing your book in print for the first time. Let's talk about your fantasy books, your ones that
Mhm.
you wrote, like you've got to a printer, either KDP or through a publisher, and now you have this beautiful book in your hands. How was that a different experience for you than it was? Because you had so many books in the past, it was almost like, it's just another one, or was this somehow different?
No, so with my first one with Eulogy, it felt like pretty cool to hold it in my hands. I wasn't trying to like market it a whole lot. It was more of like kind of for myself. But with Tides of Gifora, my publisher put in so much work into it. We got this great Italian artist to create this custom cover, and like it looked beautiful, and I'm like all this work had gone into it, and it was formatted like just gorgeously, and that was pretty cool to see that. And then to get like I got like a stack of them, and then I was like, wow, now it kind of feels real just to see like multiple of them, be like,
Hmm.
okay, people can actually like buy this and have it in their house. But I think
Right.
the weirdest thing for me was we're getting audiobook auditions right now.
Oh,
And
nice.
so I listened to the audiobook audition, and it was just so, I like personally it was almost like um I almost felt like embarrassed, like to hear someone like reading it out loud. I was like, that's my book. They're reading my book. And I was like, oh, people don't want to hear this, and then like
Oh, you're reading that passage wrong. It goes like this.
like, oh no, like my writing isn't that good. There's moments of self-doubt, especially when you see it in
Mhm.
print. You're like, wow, no one is anybody gonna want to read this, but like kind of
Yeah,
we talked about, like at the end of the day it's for yourself, and if it's
right.
gonna catch on, it's gonna catch on. If you believe in it, that's gonna make a massive difference, and I do believe in that one. So
Yeah.
I think as I was listening to it, it was started to be pretty cool, but at the beginning it's just like, oh wow, that's my words, I wrote that. I don't know how I feel about it yet.
Are the people going to be like reading it verbatim, or are you going to have like different people read the different characters and have it sound more like a radio presentation or something like that?
So I think it's just gonna be like one person
Okay.
narrating it. Um,
Okay.
so we had a pretty good one, so hopefully that'll get started soon. I'm really excited about that because I have many people that I know who enjoy reading, enjoy stories, but they don't have the attention span to sit down and do it. So they're really gonna would rather have the audiobook to play. So
Sure.
I think that might really help, just like marketing and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Get it really.
it's important. People have asked for copies of audiobooks from my books, and I'm like, what? Because that's something I never thought about doing. And
Yeah,
I thought, well, maybe I'll just do my own audio version. I got a nice microphone. I know how to record, but
yeah,
yeah, I just don't know. Yeah, it takes an awful lot of time to read, 400 pages of work and to have
it
it come out
does.
perfectly, you know. Yeah.
No pressure, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I don't know if I want to hear myself. I mean, I love hearing myself talk, but I don't know if I really want to do that,
Want to
So
dedicate to it,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly, right. um, have you ever read your own work a year or more after you published it? Like, well, because again, you were kind of an aberration in that you've been writing for such a long time, but like your published works, have you let them sit for a year or two and then you come back to reread them? And what was that experience like?
So my first one, that one I wrote in probably 2016. Came out in 2019, so it's still like recent, kind of
Hmm.
recent. I haven't yet gone back and read it yet, but I still have it, still like still letting it age. I don't think
Sure.
I'm quite ready to kind of go at it with fresh eyes yet. But I have people who I know who have read it and really enjoyed it, and I was like, well, that's great. I'm sure I'll remember what it's about when I read it.
Don't be surprised if you don't remember
But
as much as you
yeah, I'm
think you
like,
will.
wow, that's interesting. Like,
Because you're creating new things. I mean, you're always creating something new, and it depending on if you're working with the one book and one line and sequels, or if you're working in multiple genres. Um, yeah, because when you come back to it, like I'm working on the second of this cozy series, and I had done 3 books in between, all different genres. And to come back to it, I had to reread the first book because I didn't remember it. Like I don't remember it. It's like you just set it out in the world and just it lives or it dies on its own.
yeah, yeah.
And so
I
I
think
read it again. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think that like kind of on that same, like going back and reading it when I did read it, I noticed how like almost small it was compared to even my second book, like just how small the world was and how it was crazy to see how much I had expanded and how many cultures and like kinds of people and creatures I had added since that first book. So that was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Oh, that's
Um,
good. Yeah, you have to expand. You have to do that. To keep it tiny would be very claustrophobic.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, Hobbiton is nice. I'd like to visit Hobbiton, but we want to go out into the larger world so that when we come back to Hobbiton, realize how nice and quaint it is and how much we've outgrown it. You know,
Yeah, how comfortable it is. You're like, oh,
right?
this is like
Yeah, except for the hobbits who came back and they look at, like they do this particularly effectively in Jackson's version is when they look at each other, there's that moment after they come back when they all look at each other and say, they just kind of share this look like,
mm,
we've all outgrown this. No one's going to ever know what we've been through. And that to me is like one of my favorite moments of the whole thing.
like
But
finishing a video game, you come back with all this fancy armor and everything, and you're like, wow.
yeah, you get the infinite shotgun and Resident Evil, too. Like, yes, come on, zombies, I can take you.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. Do you I know with the pandemic it's probably been hard to do, but do you plan on like doing book shows or selling your books like in person at events or anything like that?
Absolutely. We've definitely been looking at cons and stuff like that. It's just kind of still a little weird right now as far as like
Yeah.
pricing and stuff like that. But what I've heard from some supporters and friends is that who go to a lot of like really local cons, they're like, you really need to get in there because once you get in there and you know the people, it's pretty much the same people. It's the same sort of like niche groups. And once they know you, they will buy all of your books. Once
Hmm.
they find authors that they enjoy, they will absolutely invest in you. And that's the best way, one of the best ways to really market yourself. But that was pre-COVID. So now,
Right.
might be a little bit longer before I can really get in there that way,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
right.
Yes.
I had been doing book shows for a while with my other books, and I really had liked it. Um, sometimes you just break even, and that's a good day. So
Mhm.
but I was really hoping to come back this year for it. But I don't know. I can't make any plans in November. We don't know what the world's going to be like, Um, so no, I definitely look forward to it. It's really fun when you go and meet people and they buy your book, or if they come back and they buy another one, at another con, and you talk about it. It's something very special when they ask you to like sign their book and things. It's just kind of a cool transaction. It's very special. And so I hope you get that. I hope you get those moments.
Hope so too. Yeah, I was really looking forward to it, and then the pandemic happened,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
everything
Hopefully,
changed.
right. Yes, exactly, exactly. Um, what is your writer fantasy?
My
Like, if you have a
writing.
fantasy, like when you think about writing, is
Mm,
there a fantastic end? Like, imagine like winning the lottery. Like, oh, if I won the lottery, I would do X, Y, and Z. So, if there was a fantasy for you as a writer, where's the end? What is it like? Yeah, my fantasy is this.
I think I would like the smallest version of that. I would be happy if all I had to do was write. I would be happy if I could kind of own it, and it would be something that was a full-time job that I could really make my own, do my own schedule kind of thing. Big picture, like it'd be great to have like a movie or a series, something like that. That's always kind of a goal. I know my first book, Eulogy, was sent to someone, my publisher sent it to someone in Hollywood. I don't think that it got chosen, but it was
Hmm.
really cool to think that someone was looking at it.
Sure.
Um, so I think that that's a really good goal. I would love to do like more kind of stuff like this, like podcasts or talk shows, stuff like that. There's always a fantasy of like answering all these questions about it,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So, or even like traveling, doing book shows. I think always going to be writing, so anything that I get out of it is just a bonus. So
Yeah.
I think anything from here on, I'll be excited about and happy with. So
That's great.
about where I'm at.
Yeah, well, that's good. You gotta be happy with where you're at. So that's good. That's good. Just a couple more questions and we'll be done. So what advice would you give to anyone who wants to write?
If you want to write, then you just gotta write. Like you gotta put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard. Even if it's not something that's good, even if it's just something you personally feel like you need to get off your chest, writing is one of the greatest tools out there for any purpose. There's all kinds of resources, but a lot of it is kind of just finding your own voice. It has to come from within. And I think that's the biggest thing, because it has to be authentic. So as long as you're authentic and you keep practicing, you keep writing, and you keep reading, that's the other aspect is you have to read everything. You have to constantly be reading and learning, expanding your vocabulary, stuff like that. Then if you keep up with that, it's like anything. Like you keep practicing, you're gonna get better at it.
Right?
So
Exactly. Yeah. And it takes a while to find that voice. I mean, so
it
I don't want
does.
to, yeah, writers, it's not like you're going to sit down and like, or you can't always just wait for inspiration. It's like, no,
Yeah,
sometimes you just have to
yeah.
force that. You got the squeaky, rusty gate. You got to force that gate open. You got to prime the pump, and then the rust comes off the fingers and you start getting into a better place.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
you just have to be willing to push. Yeah, if you're
Yeah.
if you're not willing to push, then maybe you're not ready.
Yeah.
You won't ever be ready, but you've got to be willing to push. Yeah.
Exactly. And a lot of it, there's a lot of pushing and writing. Yeah, a lot of it is not, it's not always fun. It's not joy. It's nice when it's
Editing.
done. Editing, yeah, editing, right. Yeah, exactly. Right. I know that my current work, I know there's some editing that's going to be need to be done, because there's two characters that I realized when I wrote them, I wasn't inspired at all. Like, these were characters who were in the first book, but had very tertiary roles. And I'm trying to develop them a little bit more in this one. Um, and adding more characters in each book so that by the time I get all done and do the horror story, I have more people to kill. So, you know, uh, but I realize I don't know who these are. I don't have their personalities. They're like trout right now, just flopping around, you know. So, but that's one thing I noticed as I wrote them, because even when I was trying to write their dialogue, I'm like, God, I don't know what to say. And so, yeah. So I'm hoping, because it's been a while since I looked at it, when I go back and read it, I'll be able to have something in mind going to that. Can you tell me about your current work in progress?
So I have two works in progress right now. One is the Ungifted story, that could birth another 5 or 6 books. And then and then the other one I'm working on is Hearthslayer, which is the prequel to Tides of Ghaffora, and that's going to follow my main character Wenwen and her pretty much journey to becoming queen. So I'm really excited about her character development. And I had put a lot of myself into her, and she's got a lot of inspirations from very strong women. I'm just really excited to see her story come to life. So
That's great.
that's where I am now.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Well, is there anything else that you would like to promote over
um,
here?
Not that I can think of. I do have my short story, my anthology, The Mountain, but that is still in the works, so that might be a little bit longer.
Okay. And last
But
question, where can we find your books?
so they're all on Amazon right now. Both of them are. If you look up Eulogy, Tale Terial, or Tides of Ghaffora, they'll be on there.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Sena, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. I've had a real good, enjoyable hour and a half getting to know you and hearing about your process and talking about writing. This has been a great pleasure for me.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I was a little nervous coming in my first kind of podcast thing, but
Oh, this
I
was your
really
first
enjoyed
one?
it. Yes, it was.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Thank you.
You never would have known. You were very composed and
Oh,
calm.
thanks.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
nice. Well, this is great. This is great. Yeah, this is fun. I just love doing this for that same reason, just talking, and try just keeping it casual. So I'm gonna do my commercial and then we're gonna get out of here.
Sounds good.
All right. You've been watching and listening to Between the Lines. You can listen to us at unsaneradio.com. You can get full episodes there or download to your device. You can watch us on our YouTube page, Between the Lines Podcast. If you're watching, that's where you're at. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you know someone who'd like our show, tell them about us. And if you're a writer and would like to come on for a chat, email me at betweenthelines54@yahoo.com. That's betweenthelines54@yahoo.com. And Sena, here's my cheesy outro line. See you next time, Between the Lines.
Oh, thanks. I wasn't ready.
That's great, right?
That's great. Yeah.